All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. I am really happy to introduce Jennifer Bates, who I hope many of you know by now. Jennifer is just coming up on a year with NRAO, which is really exciting. And she is the Broadening Participation Program Manager here at ODI and is the project lead for Project Radial. One of the, among her many talents, and skills, Jennifer is also a licensed clinical social worker and is going to be talking with us today about a very important topic that I think will be very helpful for all of us, stress fatigue. So Jennifer, I'm going to hand this over to you now.
All right, thank you, and greetings to you all. So as Lindell said, my name is Jennifer Bates and we are talking about managing stress fatigue. So let's see. There we go. So just briefly to go over our agenda, I'll do a little intro to talk about myself. We'll talk about brain and stress, what stress fatigue is, the stress continuum, staying cool, which are some coping mechanisms, and then mental health first aid will be a part of the staying cool component of our agenda. So for those of you who have done anything with me before, you know that I like to introduce myself in quotes, and I changed my quotes up for the new year. And so I really like to make my choices based on what I hope for and not what I'm afraid of happening. And so I try to live into each of these quotes daily as a way of introducing myself that is something that is not just about who I am as a professional. I like to care for myself and really take ownership of that and not put that off on someone else or justify not doing it. And also, this is a year that I really want to let go of things that are not meaningful and important to me, but take up space for me, either mentally, emotionally, or physically. And so I encourage you to find some quotes that also mean much to you and live into them daily. So as we start off talking about stress fatigue, I wanted us to start with some quotes for thought for us as a group. The topic itself is really stressful. I was stressed out when I was preparing for it. And so I included quotes just to remind us all of our inner resilience. So I'll just read them quickly. Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars. The human capacity, for burden is like bamboo, far more flexible than you'd ever believe at first glance. Turn your wounds into wisdom. So I want us to take these quotes and allow them to be our guides for engaging in this topic today. Some reminders of kindness. It's important to be sensitive to the needs of your colleagues. As you see, as we go through today's presentation, you'll find that we all respond to stress differently, and what is stressful for you may not be stressful for someone else, and vice versa. In order to maintain the space as supportive, make room for all stressors and responses to them. At the same time, while this space is non-judgmental, it is not the time or the space to share your stressors in order to solicit support from your colleagues. So please refrain from sharing long or intense personal stories of stress or resilience. We'll talk about cultivating spaces for that type of sharing later, but this is not the space for it. Lastly, take care of yourself. Have something good to eat or drink. It might be your lunch break right now. Take breaks as you need. There will be time at the end, and we might even end a few minutes early. So you showed up here today probably feeling a little bit stressed, but also perhaps a little bit surprised or intrigued about why this topic is important. As we will see, heightened stress often leads to isolation and feeling separate and uniquely ill-equipped to handle the pressure. But that is not the case. So I included this graphic to show that scientists in general also feel stressed. This research was done, and the composition of scientists, it was about 52% physicists and 38% biologists, and then the other percentages were different science fields. 43% of the scientists surveyed say that their work feels more stressful since the pandemic. And they also identified that research collaborations have suffered. And if you look at this graphic right in the middle, 44% said that there was somewhat of a change, and 29% said that it worsened somewhat, and then they identified it. I'm sorry, I'm reading it from the wrong direction. 18% identified that it worsened considerably, and 44% identified that it worsened, that mental health worsened somewhat. So it is a big deal. Mental health is a big deal. Feeling stressed out is a big deal. And so we'll talk about what that is and what that means for us. We'll use Dr. Paul MacLean's triune brain model developed in the 1950s. It is a simplification of the complexity of the brain, for sure. But it is neurologically accurate, and it's helpful in presenting the major regions and functions of the brain as we are talking about it. So again, we aren't digging in too deep, just a little bit of overview and oversight. The brainstem that you see in the red was developed at birth, and it is the most primitive part of our brain. So it's sometimes referred to as the reptilian brain. It controls heart rate, breathing, body temperature, balance, those types of things. The limbic system in the yellow is comprised of many important regions, including the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the hypothalamus. The limbic system, where the brain system is all about safety and survival, making sure that the body is functioning. The limbic system is all about memories, fears, emotions, arousal, empathy. It is the seat for connection and relationship. The prefrontal cortex, sometimes called the thinking brain, is where we integrate our thoughts and actions into problem solving. It is the executive functioning of the brain. It's important to remember that our brains develop from the back to the front, from the inside outward, and the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until the mid to late 20s. It's also important to note that although the prefrontal cortex is the executive functioning of the brain, any element of the brain can trigger a response in the body. It is only the prefrontal cortex that can integrate experiences from the limbic system, information about the body from the brainstem, in order to create a response that is informed by all of those things. So, for example, let's say that you see a piece of chocolate cake sitting on the counter and you eat it. If you have no idea why you ate it, it was probably driven by your brainstem with information from the limbic system via the HPA axis, which we'll talk about in just a second. If you saw it and remembered having chocolate cake during your favorite birthday party and you ate it, that was probably driven by your limbic system, right? You're thinking of memories of chocolate cake and you fondly remembered them while you were eating it. If you saw the cake, remembered your birthday, and considered how you might feel after eating the cake, what it might or may not do to your physique, and then decided to eat the cake, then that was driven by your prefrontal cortex. So just some ways that we think about the different parts of our brain. So that's the brain, that's what we're all working with. So what is stress? Briefly, stress is the internal tension that naturally occurs in response to external pressures. The stressor is disruptive in nature and requires some action or reaction in order to regain homeostasis or equilibrium. A stressor can be an actual event or situation like a submission deadline or presentation, or it can be the anticipation of something happening, including negative and repetitive thoughts about the outcome. The stress can involve a triage response that we're going to talk about in a little bit. We evaluate the threat and ways of coping, inner resources, and the help and support, the availability of help and support of others. So there are two different brain responses to stress that we're going to talk about briefly. I want to just acknowledge I'm not going to do justice to the science and the theory, because that's not the focus. It's just an overview, so we have a general understanding of two different theories of how the brain responds to stress. This is the stimulus response theory. So our brain's response to stress is to go into survival mode, because the stress or stressor is is at its most basic level a threat against the body's equilibrium. Excuse me. In this model, the brain experiences stress. Stress activates a release of hormones to help power the body to respond with full energy with a fight, flight, or freeze response. After the response, there's an energy drain, and then the brain says, yep, all clear, and the systems return to normal, usually in about 20 minutes. If we take a deep dive into this side, stress, hardwired response, cortisol, and adrenaline dump, we take a deep look into that side of the axis. Let's talk about that a little bit. right? Taking a magnifying glass to the right side of the diagram. This is the hardwired automatic response of your body to stress. HPA stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the firefighters of your brain. The hypothalamus, located in the limbic region, secretes CRH, which signals the pituitary gland to release ACTH, which signals the adrenal glands, which are located on the top of your kidneys in your body, to secrete glucocorticoids. These are stress hormones whose primary functions are to maintain homeostasis. Remember, that is our survival goal, to return to a state of equilibrium. So the glucocorticoids are synthesized and released by adrenal glands, and they affect nearly every organ and tissue in the body. Activities include mobilizing energy into the bloodstream from storage sites in the body, increasing cardiovascular tone, and delaying long-term processes in the body that aren't essential during a crisis, like feeding, digestion, growth, and reproduction. So glucocorticoids do more than help the body respond to stress. They also help the body respond to environmental change. In these two roles, they are in fact essential for survival. So it's important to note here, stress hormones are not bad. They are essential. They are functional, unless there is dysfunction present in the body. So we return to the survival model, the stimulus response model. In chronic situations, the body never recovers from the hormonal flood stage and can't effectively return to status quo. Thus, spiraling effects of stress take over, because again, the body is flooded with those stress hormones that do an amazing job in what they're supposed to do, but they are also supposed to be synthesized and released from the body's system. The brain is stuck in threat response mode. In time, this creates an inflammation response, we'll get to that in a sec, with cascading effects on the body. This is the state of the brain in this model during stress fatigue. So let's look at another theory. This is the theory of constructed emotion, and it proposes that our brain integrates sensory information from within the body, which is called interoception, with information outside of the body, makes predictions about what will happen in the external world and our internal bodily needs, and then prepares our body for action by regulating energetic and immune resources through allostasis, meaning the process by which the body responds to stress to maintain equilibrium. The TCE proposes that the brain doesn't operate in a stress response model. So it's not stress, threat, respond, right? Rather, the brain largely unconsciously makes both predictions and calibrates prediction errors about both the external world and the internal milieu, seeking to match metabolic resources to external demands and internal needs. So here the theory explains that when the brain predicts an acute threat-related stressor, it causes a cascading response in the body, right? The brain is predictive. Please note that in both models, the HPA axis that we just went over is activated and the flood of stress hormones occurs. That process is not interrupted and remains true. And the models differ slightly in the way that the brain interprets stress. So anyone and everyone can experience stress fatigue, right? However, because perception and past experience impacts our experience of stressors, stress fatigue can occur at different times depending on the individual. So stress fatigue is mental exhaustion caused by worrying or difficulty in coping with a situation in your life. It results in thoughts and feelings rather than physical exertion. And it is different than physical exhaustion, right? So a good night's sleep doesn't eliminate the exhaustion that is felt during stress fatigue. It is possible to have lived with stress for so long that being stressed out feels normal. The consequences or symptoms of stress no longer feel unusual. They are a constant and consistent way of life. Some of the symptoms of stress fatigue include, again, that general feeling of weariness. Sometimes it manifests itself in being tired or drowsy without the ability to sleep. So that's the number one symptom. There are also other symptoms related to the physical effects of that stress, including sore or aching muscles, headaches, moodiness or irritability, dizziness or blurred vision, loss of appetite, difficulties with short-term memory, and inability to concentrate or focus on tasks, slowed reflexes, feeling like your actions are useless or you can't change your situation, lack of motivation, just to name a few. Your brain cells communicate with one another via compounds known as neurotransmitters. Chronic stress reduces levels of serotonin and dopamine, which are important players in regulating our mood, tension, energy, and motivation, right? So if you're wondering, why are those the symptoms of stress fatigue? This is the why. Low levels of either of these neurotransmitters can contribute to depression, anxiety, binge eating, addiction, lethargy, apathy, and anhedonia, which is a fancy way of saying an inability to take pleasure in life. It can also increase the activity of an enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine, so you end up with less of it in your brain. That's the main neurotransmitter involved in stimulating wakefulness, cognitive performance, and energy. Less acetylcholine means less energy. Chronic stress can also induce a GABA resistance. GABA is the inhibitory neurotransmitter. So by lowering the sensitivity to GABA, it essentially prevents the brain from efficiently going into relaxation and rejuvenation mode. To sum it up, GABA resistance means that you will be more stimulated and have a tendency towards racing thoughts, more fears, more anxiety, more tension, and poor sleep, less ability to rejuvenate yourself. Stress fatigue can also lower thyroid function and levels of thyroid hormones. People experiencing stress fatigue or chronic stress have symptoms that mirror hypothyroidism, including fat gain, hair loss, chronic pain, amongst other symptoms. You may see an overlap in the impacts of stress fatigue and the symptoms of stress fatigue, and that's purposeful, right? Stress fatigue can impact multiple systems in your body and a multitude of different ways. Researchers are continuing to analyze the toll that chronic stress can take on the body and the various symptoms or the various systems within the body that are impacted. So let's talk a bit about the stress continuum. The stress continuum was first created for use by the U.S. Marine Corps in combat settings. It's often used as a snapshot. It was used as a snapshot about how soldiers were managing stress during combat operations, but now it is applied in a variety of settings, including firefighters, law enforcement officers, healthcare, mental health providers, et cetera, through a program called Stress First Aid. Although I'm a certified trainer in Stress First Aid, this is not an SFA training. However, where there is occupational stress, the stress continuum applies and can be helpful, which is why I included it here. The stress continuum can be used as a self-assessment tool to help you to identify where you are in real time in response to a stressor or a series of stressful events. It can serve as a communication tool, expanding the universal "I'm fine" response to more precise expression of stress. For many of us, some iteration of the header statements that you see at the top is an accurate description of our emotional state and can be used, can help us to know when to ask for help. It's also helpful in identifying which area of your life is creating stress. For example, there are times when I feel like I've really got this as a parent, but I am feeling in the red as a wife, or I'm feeling in my creative flow in some areas of work, but really struggling with other professional tasks and responsibilities. The stress continuum also names the dynamic nature of occupational stress. It is common and predictable to move towards the red in times of unrelenting pressure, task saturation, acute traumatic stress exposure, and exhaustion. It allows us to name that experience and normalizes the reality of stress fatigue and crisis. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the red part of the continuum, and then we will move slowly into the blue and green part of the continuum. So let's talk a little bit about crisis. It's important to note here that this is more than stress fatigue. This is crisis, right? A disabling distress and loss of function, the presence of panic attacks, nightmares, or flashbacks, inability to sleep or stay asleep, or sleeping significantly more than usual, intrusive thoughts of self-harm or suicide, feeling easily agitated or enraged, an inability to concentrate, feeling numb or out of control, withdrawing from relationships completely, and a dependence on substance or other numbing agents, as a way of coping. So a crisis is an acute disruption of psychological homeostasis in which one's usual coping mechanisms fail, and there exists evidence of distress and functional impairment. That means that what I typically would use to cope with stress isn't working. Something has gone over the wall, and now I am flooded with overwhelming emotion. It is a subjective reaction to a stressful life experience, right, that really compromises a person's ability to cope, function, and a personal general feeling of stability. It is important to note here that the failure to cope for a crisis is one of the defining features, right? You're not able to cope, and there is functional impairment. I want to talk briefly about the different levels of stress, the different levels of crisis, not only to give that some thought for your awareness, but to also note how quick it can occur, how quickly we can be thrown into crisis when we aren't expecting it. There are different levels of crises, as you see here. Ann Wahlberg Burgess has researched and taught about this for decades, and she and Albert Roberts, who studied crisis intervention and response, developed this model for identifying levels of crisis and also crisis intervention. We aren't going to get into crisis intervention. We'll just talk about the crises. Level 1, situations with a biomedical cause. On this level, the situation itself or the lack of coping in response to the situation has a physiological basis. So this would include health problems, situational problems that arise as a result of low-level mental illness, chemical dependency, those types of things. For level 2, this level includes expected or typical life events. They are certainly still stressful and can create a crisis. However, they are typical and common as transitional types of stressors. For example, a divorce, a job loss, moving, parental death. Those are all transitional sources of stress and crises that are normative within typical life events. Traumatic stress, these stressful events are unexpected. They can be life-threatening, whereas level 1 and level 2 crises generally are not life-threatening. For levels 4, 5, and 6, each could be considered to be a crisis or a chronic stressor, depending on the presence and ongoing nature of any of them, right? So level 4 involves issues with the family, either family of origin or family of choice, or interpersonal relationships where trauma remains unresolved and harmful. So a traumatic relationship with a parent, for instance, where the trauma, remains present and hasn't been resolved. A diagnosis of a severe mental illness is level 5. The emergence of a psychiatric emergency. On this level, as compared to mental health crises on level 1, there's a significant impact on functioning. And level 7 would be a combination of traumatic stress crises and chronic stressors. So everything coming together at one time. If you are someone that you know is in crisis, it's important that you know that you are not alone. Crises happen, and they can happen to anyone at any time. That's why I went over the different levels of crisis to note that crisis can occur for anyone. The experience of crisis is not a reflection of a lack of ability. Instead, it's that the natural ability to cope has been depleted, and now is the time to get external support until your reservoirs can be built back up. I would encourage anyone experiencing a crisis to call 911 or utilize some of the resources on this screen. I'll pause for just a moment for those who may need to take a screenshot or write some of these resources down, or if anyone would like to take a stretch break. All right, let's get back into it. So we are back to the stress continuum. Let's shift briefly to the orange and yellow levels, the orange and yellow. So instead of being in crisis, which would be the red, struggling, it's a feeling of not being able to manage, right? I can't keep this up. Notice the difference in verb tense, I can't keep this up versus I can't survive this. So when someone is in the orange, That means that they're feeling a persistent sense of fear, panic, anxiety, or anger, pervasive feelings of hopelessness or sadness, mental, physical, or emotional exhaustion, poor performance and decision-making, difficulty concentrating, increased isolation versus complete withdrawal and crisis. So increased isolation, changes in sleep and appetite, and then an increased use versus a dependent, increased use of substances, food, or other numbing activities. When someone is in the orange, this is a great time for interventions or a wonderful time to offer some of the resources that I shared on the previous slide. Surviving, something doesn't feel right, like something's not right. I'm usually a little bit better at it than I am right. Something's not right. Nervous or and or sad, right? Inconsistent performance, more easily overwhelmed or irritated, increased need for control, right? So things feel out of my control, so an increased need to control what's going on. Difficulty hearing feedback, difficulty adapting, disrupted sleep and eating patterns, decreased interest or enjoyment in activities that used to bring pleasure. Again, that anhedonia that I spoke to earlier, muscle tension. So when we are thinking about stress fatigue, right? If stress fatigue is on this continuum, stress fatigue would be the yellow and the orange, right? Crisis is red. So stress fatigue would be staying in the yellow or the orange for most of the time. So I want us to shift gears and talk a little bit about staying in the green or the blue. So green would be feeling like I've got this, calm and steady with a couple of little mood fluctuations here and there, feeling connected to yourself and to others, being aware of your life priorities and being able to think through what they might look like, the ability to take things in stride, right? So get the feedback, incorporate the feedback. Be consistent in performance, make adjustments, communicate effectively, normal sleep and appetite habits. So those are going to be the activities or the way of what would characterize the way of being when we're in the green. So being in the blue, you're in the flow, right? That creative flow where things feel not just easy, but natural, things feel rewarding and open. Right, so confident and curious, clear and energized in terms of your mental capacity, pursuing interest, compassionate and kind, connected, open lines of communication, having a growth mindset. So really exploring things and being open to what happens next. Having a balance in life priorities. So not just knowing what your life priorities are, but feeling like you have a really dynamic balance in what you are prioritizing in your life. Feeling connected to a purpose, a sense of my life is meaningful and it is important, and having normal sleep and appetite. So the green and the blue feel really good. And I think we would all love to stay there as much as possible. So my guess is you might be thinking, yeah, that's where I want to be. That's where I would love to be. That sounds great. How do I get there? Because I feel orangey, right? So let's talk about it a little bit. We spoke about interoception when we discussed the theory of constructed emotion, the theories of constructed emotion model of stress, that our brain makes meaning of the stress as it's impacted by interoception, right? What's going on inside and what's going on outside. So interoception is the awareness of our body, how we feel on a sensory level. If my heart is pounding as I'm giving this presentation, right? Going really, really fast. Having interoception helps with my awareness of it, which allows me to start to unravel why I feel this way and restore my sense of control. Remember, a characteristic of being, in the yellow, orange, and red is feeling out of control. Developing, cultivating interoception increases a sense of agency, which increases the ability to feel I'm in control, right? It's not a strict calculated way of feeling in control, like this is my square and nobody gets in or out of it unless I say so. But it's a blue-green kind of control. I know what's going on and I can adjust without feeling overwhelmed. Developing interoception. So this is a practice that we'll do together. The cameras are off, so I'm not going to see if you do it or if you start eating your lunch or checking your email. I'm going to invite you to do it. We're going to do a quick practice to develop interoception, and I invite you to try it. Take 4 deep breaths. I'm gonna let you know what we're gonna do, then I'll guide you through it. We're gonna take 4 deep breaths, in through your nose and out through your mouth. In through your nose for a count of 4, out through your mouth for a count of 8. Then we're going to think about a moderately distressing situation, something that's about a 2 or a 3 on a 5-point scale. And then we're going to ask some questions. All right, here we go. Let's take 4 deep breaths together, breathing in through your nose, 2, 3, 4, hold it, 2, 3, 4, and breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Take 2 more deep breaths, all on your own. Now think of a moderately distressing situation. Again, something that's about 2 or 3 on a 5-point scale. Bring it up in your mind. And then I'm going to ask you some questions. What am I feeling? Ask yourself, when did I start feeling this way? Where in my body am I feeling these feelings? Why am I responding to this situation in this way? Who are my sources of support? How would I like to feel about this situation? Take 4 more deep breaths. Notice any changes that you might experience in your body. Great. We just cultivated interoception in 5 minutes or less. I think it was 3 minutes. Good job, everyone. Research has shown the benefits of mindfulness, an intentional practice of calming your mind and becoming more aware and attuned to your body. One practice for stressful situations is to escape momentarily to a safe space. This practice allows you to have a pause between the stress and the automated response that you may have by turning your mind from the situation at hand to a place of peace. You may notice that the stressors may not seem as overwhelming for you once you return from that safe place. So we won't do this exercise, but I will read it out loud for you. So again, a safe space is a place that gives you a sense of calm, safety, or peace. It can be real or imagined, but if it is real, it can never have been an unsafe space. So it can't be a place where you have experienced stress, or it's not a safe space. And you might want to create a safe space that has some of the general characteristics of that real space without the stress. So the mindfulness script goes as follows. You certainly don't have to participate in this one because I'll be reading it a little bit fast. So take 4 deep breaths and close your eyes. In your mind, identify an image of a safe space. Notice any sights, smells, sounds, things that you can touch and or taste that you associate with the space. Breathe slowly again and give yourself time to look around your space. Notice what you see, what reminds you that you are safe. Notice what you feel in your body and any positive emotional responses. Breathe deeply and in your mind, look around some more. This time thinking about one word that will bring you back to this place. When you're ready, remind yourself that you can return to this place anytime you'd like and open your eyes and look around your present surroundings. So again, as you notice, This practice can take as long or as little in time as you would like. It can be a 3-minute practice. It can be a 30-minute practice to start to develop interoception and stay cool, connecting to your body. This is a favorite quote of mine because it reminds me of the importance of community and the dangers of isolation. So no person trying to take responsibility for his or her identity should have to be so alone. There must be those among whom we can sit down and weep and still be counted as warriors. Staying cool requires having safe surroundings and safe allies. The main difference between a safe place and a safe surrounding is that a safe surrounding is an actual present-day space where you feel safe. It is cultivated. It may be centered around shared interests or identities, and it's populated by allies. Your allies can be real or imagined, people you know or folks you've never met. Animals can be your allies. And of course, only living allies can be in your safe surrounding, right? So if they are imagined, they aren't going to be in your safe surrounding. For both of these, trust your gut in terms of safety. If the surrounding or the ally, real or imagined, doesn't create feelings of calm or peace, if you can't be your authentic self, then it's probably not safe for you right now. And that's okay. Allies, even those who are protective of you or provide wisdom, should never create feelings of hurt or negativity. If they do, they aren't safe for you right now. So take some time at some point to reflect on your safe surroundings and allies. And again, within this training, allies are defined as sources of compassion, support, protection, strength, wisdom, and/or inspiration. Creating safe spaces may seem like a really personal thing, something that's done outside of work. But I brought this research back to our attention to note that these statistics demonstrate to us that more than half of the scientists in this study identified worsened mental health and noticed a change in their colleagues. So the responsibility is not just personal, it is also professional. So in finding a safe space and surrounding for yourself, you're surrounding yourself with others who are safe. Having the desire to create safety, so wanting to be an ally, wanting to create a safe surrounding for others, is not the same as having the necessary skills to do so. This is where mental health first aid comes into play. So mental health first aid is a skills-based training course that teaches participants how to identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental health and substance use challenges among adults. I didn't read the graphic earlier, but one in five people have symptoms that are diagnostic as mental illness or a mental distress. So it is likely to occur that need is there. Taking this course is similar to taking a CPR or first aid course, and that it gives you the skills to respond appropriately without the assumption that you are a mental health provider. Courses will be offered to staff at NRAO by me. So please check your emails for additional announcements regarding the rollout. But in general, you are required to complete a 2-hour self-paced online course and then a 5-hour instructor-led virtual training. So the butterfly hug is another technique that you can do for yourself. It originated by, with mental health workers who are working with survivors of a hurricane. This approach is often taught in therapy, but can be used by individuals in a self-soothing context. So what you do, you certainly don't have to, but you can, cross 2 hands over your chest. Cross it like that. Press gently if you'd like, and just pat. You can breathe slowly and deeply and just notice changes in your body. What happens is that it slowly starts to remind you that you are safe and that you don't have to respond to the flood of hormones, stress hormones that are going through your body. It's a good, easy one to do in times of stress, and it's also a fun one to do with your kids if you have them or someone else. Urge surfing is a technique for managing your unwanted behaviors. Sometimes we respond to stress with actions that we regret after the emotional response has decreased. With urge surfing, rather than giving into the urge, you can ride it out like a surfer riding a wave. After a short time, the urge will pass on its own. This technique can be used to stop or reduce drug or alcohol use, emotional reactions, or emotional reactions such as blowing up when angry, withdrawing when you feel extremely sad or put upon, or other unwanted behaviors that you notice are disruptive to your lifestyle. So the first thing, right, is just to acknowledge that you're having an urge. Realize that you are being triggered. Notice your thoughts and feelings without trying to change or suppress them. And it's common to have some discomfort at this time. Remind yourself that you're okay, that it's okay to have urges. It's a natural reaction, and that this discomfort doesn't have to be changed. The urge is a feeling, not a must. I have this feeling and can choose not to act. Or you might say to yourself, this feeling is temporary and it will pass on its own. It will peak, right? And then it will slowly start to fall away. This might be a good time as it's rising and peaking to engage in distraction techniques, or to engage in some type of exercise or movement to keep your mind off of the urge that you might be experiencing. Go for a walk, listen to music, call a friend, practice a hobby. Take your mind off of the urge. Every minute you delay increases the chance of the urge weakening on its own. So staying cool by surfing the wave. Often we know what we need, but we don't always give ourselves permission to engage in the activity. It feels decadent or self-indulgent. We feel the pressure of time or finances or something else. Today, commit to giving yourself permission to engage in one of these activities or another activity that brings you joy. Some of my suggestions include taking the day off from everything. This is inspired by Dr. Maya Angelou's practice of taking the day, turning off her phone and wandering around her city as if she were a tourist to give herself time to reflect and refresh. Other practices include reading a book, journaling, laughing, saying no to something, maybe saying yes to something. Release yourself from the judgment. Either way, color, be still, connect with someone or something meaningful. Again, I remind you to engage in self-care to the point that it makes you feel good emotionally, physically, mentally, to that point of satisfaction. Overindulgence can create feelings of guilt, and underindulgence can feel really disappointing. Here are some resources in case you are interested in learning more about interoception, developing some of your own stress management techniques. The Body Keeps the Score is a classic. Both The Body Keeps the Score and Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers are really talking about some of the toxic impacts of stress on the body, and they both have some resources in terms of how you can manage it. Radical Compassion really speaks to the practice of developing compassion for yourself through the practice of interoception. And then the other books below also speak to the development of self-compassion and interoception as you move forward. Tara Brock's website has a lot of meditation practices. If you are interested, they're recorded and free. And the therapistaid.com has a lot of worksheets. If you are someone who likes to write things down on paper, even though it says Therapist Aid, the worksheets are free and available to the public. So I'll leave you with one last quote. Everything costs. In order to win, we pay with energy, effort, and discipline. If we lose, we pay in disappointment, discontent, and lack of fulfillment. So since a price will be exacted from us for everything we do or leave undone, we should pluck up the courage to win back our finer, kinder, and healthier selves. So I hope today's talk provided you with knowledge, hope, and maybe even a few options for doing the good work of winning back your finer, kinder, and healthier self. All right, thanks for your time. If there are questions, I can take them now. So I'll give you a few minutes to think about it. Can we unpack the last quote a bit more? Do you want me to? Or would you like to unmute and share your thoughts? I can pull it back up.
No, I think I want you to, if you have some thoughts on it, because I really enjoyed listening to you. And yeah, I don't know if you have some thoughts on that quote.
Let me pull it back up so everyone. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Wonderful. So when I brought this quote up, and the reason that I included it here is that I think oftentimes we think that working towards self-care and working towards managing our stress, saying no to things, saying yes to things that we would typically say no to, all of those things is too high a cost. And so there is a cost, right? There is a cost. The cost of not doing it is also present too. And so I included this quote because I think I wanted us to have an idea of balance, right? That there is a cost that's going to be paid, but if we're going to do it, we might as well do it to the betterment of ourselves and of others. So that's why I brought this up with the hopes that that alleviates some stress or some pressure that we might feel in doing some of the good things, some of the positive things for ourselves and for others.
Yeah. I think what struck me was the fact, like, that there was a cost to win as well. So even if you did everything right, you're still paying a cost, or everything right in terms of the limited right things that are being done. Yeah, but I guess I wanted to ask, I guess, like, so what's the what's the real way to win then? Like, if you're if you're paying a cost when you're winning in terms of like the traditional, aggressive techniques of winning, then I guess the real way to win is to be like not that aggressive in your goals, or I mean, like balancing that, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question and a great nuance. I appreciate you bringing that up. When I think of winning in the context of, I can't remember which of her books this is in, but in the context of her book, her winning was not kind of the kind of a westernized heteronormative masculine way of winning, where I take what's mine and I come out on top and I'm in the 1%. Her way of winning was more of a coming fully into yourself by living your most authentic and present life. And therefore you win by winning for yourself. You win by knowing who you are and how you are and your way of being present in the world. And so that's a good, that's a good question, because her way of winning would be to be in the green and the blue, even if that means saying no to things that are wonderful opportunities, but would shift you into the red, that would create crisis, that would create discomfort, that would throw off life priorities, and the cost is too great. And so for her, in this quote, it's taken out of context, but in this quote, the winning is really winning back your presence and your personal authenticity versus winning in a, I did this better thing, or I did it better than others, or in the competitive state that we usually think of winning.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. And yeah, I guess I also wanted to ask, I noticed, so actually I have two more questions, but I'm going to give space for other people in case there's other questions. So I can always email you.
Oh, sure. I don't see any other questions. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, you can feel free to share.
Okay, thank you everyone. But yeah, I wanted to ask about the community building aspect of that, because you mentioned she detached from the cishet capitalistic way of winning, right? And it's more sort of I guess community oriented or self oriented. So yeah, like, was there some community aspect to the winning? I don't know, in this term, or
yeah, I would think so. And again, I would say that winning or kind of becoming and developing is both an internal and an external process, right? Because part of being in the red, as we think about the stress continuum, part of the experience of stress fatigue is feeling isolated and alone. And I am uniquely ill-equipped to deal with this, but everybody else has it and I don't. Right. And so there is a community building element to being able to manage stress, because part of being in the blue and in the green is feeling connected. So it's connected to yourself as a person, to whatever your purpose is, whatever your kind of higher goals are, and also being connected to your community and to your surroundings in whatever way that feels appropriate. So it might be a large community, it might be a really small handful of people or animals or whatever populates your community that creates that feeling of connection and fulfills that sense of purpose.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then also my hopefully, I mean, my last question maybe is like, so I had read about, you know, like sometimes psychology is also based in like these white culture and like system culture. And so, for example, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like although a lot of people will refer to it and it is important in some sense, but it's not exactly, you know, like it still has that influence of like white culture and capitalistic, you know, stuff in it. And so I was wondering, like when you showed the like the blue, green, orange one, like that slide with all the levels, I was wondering, like, is that, I mean, I'm just wondering if there's a chance that that has been corrected for the like the white culture that might be inherent within like like even like stress research, right, in psychology, like how diverse is it, or like the studies that have been used to develop these, like how diverse are they, or maybe they're not. I don't know. I just wanted to ask your understanding of that.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And there is a very, so within the context of the diagnostic material, right, that is very much so the DSM-5, but like what a therapist would use to diagnose you, that is very much influenced and impacted by a white heteronormative male version of this. Like that's what is normal, right? That's the standard by which abnormalities were created historically. And so the APA is really invested in creating something that is more diverse, and doing a lot more research into the different ways in which mental health presents differently and is impacted differently in different populations. So that's another talk, not the talk that I did today, in which all of the differentials of both the presentation of mental illness and mental distress, and also how that is engaged by therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists, because you are absolutely right. There is a heteronormative white male as the standard by which abnormalities historically have been identified. And so that is a passion point of mine, but I won't get I won't get myself distracted too far on that. But to answer your question about the research in particular, so the study that I showed that had that was with the scientists, with the percentages, that diagram was actually an incredibly diverse study. It's an international study, and it was actually pretty diverse, both in terms of race, ethnicity, but also gender. I think they had a 50-50 split. They didn't involve a lot of they didn't involve the LGBTQ population necessarily. I think they had too small of a percentage to create, to really research some of the differences in that presentation. But in terms of racial and ethnic differences and diversity, and in terms of male female, that was actually a really robust study in its diversity, more robust than we often see. And also the statistics that I included, those are national statistics, and so they are normative across census data. However, I will say that in general, the mental distress, so mental health distress, is rising in communities of color and in the LGBTQ population. It's rising, if not higher, for people of color, for LGBTQ plus, and for women. And in that study, in the science study, I didn't include this slide, but women, female scientists presented with 18% higher, or they were, no, I'm sorry, 6%. So 18% of women identified feeling psychological distress on a regular basis as compared to 11% of their counterparts. And women experienced a plethora of microaggressions, including bullying, mistreatment, being given inappropriate or unrealistic timelines for completing their goals. So all of those microaggressions, again, this is a different presentation, but all of those microaggressions can be experienced as stressors or stress threats in the body. And so the idea is actually that those persons who are experiencing microaggressions actually end up experiencing chronic stress. And so they can be thrown into a situation where chronic stress is a part of their work life. And so therefore it is really difficult to feel connected to the work, to the science, to what has drawn them into the science because of the experience of stressors and microaggressions. So I didn't include that in this presentation, but that is there in that research.
And then also, as you're talking, I thought of something more. I just feel like I have millions of questions, but I think this is hopefully my last question. But no, I mean, I was gonna ask if like the colors ever blur, like on that chart, because I feel like, at least in my personal experience, there's been oscillations between the different colors. So like how discrete are those boundaries, or, you know, what kind of, like, how do you know what level you're on, if it's a continuum that you're facing on a day? Like, you know, if you're blue and then orange and then something, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I would, that continuum, it is a blur. Like there, you can be, again, as I said, you know, sometimes I feel like I am doing an amazing job as a parent, and then I feel like my marriage could, you know, it's in the cracker. This sucks. And so it really is. And again, that can be on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it completely shifts. And so the stress continuum is just a model for us to think about where we are, and you can apply it to different areas because we all have different kind of faces and components to our identity, different parts to our identity. And so there may be parts that are really green and blue, like a creative part, or a part that is really enjoying doing the science. And there may be a part that feels orange or red. That's the part that may be experiencing the microaggressions, or maybe having some crisis in a personal area. So they are not discrete categories. It is a continuum wherein we can ebb and flow. Stress fatigue is when we are consistently experiencing being in the yellow or orange, and it doesn't seem to get any better. There aren't places of green or blue, or those places of green and blue are shrinking and getting smaller and smaller. And then the red would be a place of crisis where truly getting some type of intervention would be most beneficial. So I see that we are 1 minute over our time, so I will press pause here and express all of my appreciation for all of you who attended today. You are more than welcome to reach out to me at jbates@nrao.edu if you'd like to continue this conversation further, or if you're interested in mental health first aid. But I will press pause here, turn it back over to Izzy, since we are at our time. Thank you so much for your time today.